All right, so this is going to be, new player experience and some other stuff. So I was thinking about what I do to kind of give you guys a little introduction to myself, and I started thinking about it, and I realized I made the Dominics and the Ishtar and the Stratios and the Gila and the Gecko, and I realized I kind of have a problem, and this isn't all I do at CCP, but it kind of seems like it sometimes, so I'm going to try and take it easy on drone ships. But what I've been doing lately is moved onto this team, Team Pirate Unicorns. I moved there from Team Game of Drones a little while back, and we've been tasked with working on the new player experience and kind of the player experience more broadly, just trying to make all that quality of life stuff that CCP Siegel mentioned during the keynote as good as possible, and specifically focusing on how that affects new players. So this is us. You recognize Karker probably, a lot of good stuff from her lately, and the rest of us, it's a pretty awesome team. So this presentation is, I'm going to recap the FanFest presentation I did really briefly, just to give context to kind of where we're at, because I did sort of cover what we were planning to do at FanFest this last year. And so I'll talk about that for just a bit, and then talk about kind of where we've come and what we're doing now related to the NPE. And then I thought this could use a little more kick, so I threw in a little end piece about a project of mine that I'm really excited about that's a little crazy. So you have that to be excited for at the end. All right, so the FanFest presentation, and I don't have notes here, so I'm going to go forward and try to remember. The presentation I did at FanFest last year basically just laid out kind of where we're at with the NPE. And the way we did that was we started with looking at a vision that we kind of had outlined for the game in general as a game design department. And these particular points especially, and then using that as kind of a starting point, we tried to make a plan. And so the first thing we did was looked at kind of where we're missing those vision statements in the current NPE. And there's a few ways we're doing that. We were not happy with how much text there is. Bogging people down with too much to read keeps them from having fun. The motivation and rewards in the current NPE we feel is problematic. We kind of do everything based on just this very simple reward loop of, do the next tutorial step and get a little more stuff. And people get very kind of hooked on that, and that tends to drive them into missions because that's the only place in EVE that really consistently delivers on that loop. And we wanted to get away from that if possible. We aren't meeting expectations like we want to, both in terms of setting people up to be prepared for how EVE actually works. They're expecting this mission loop kind of from the game in general when they come out of the tutorial, and that they're finding that EVE is actually a crazy sandbox, and so that's not synced up, and they're also not getting their expectations met from what they hear about the game elsewhere. If somebody goes and reads about B-R, and then they come into our tutorial, they're like confused because it's a very different experience. So we wanted to try and address that somewhat if we could. And just in general, we wanted to try and make the experiences in the NPE more rich, make them more EVE, really. Like, try to get people as fast as possible into the kind of sandbox experiences that make EVE really special. So those are the things that kind of weren't happening now. So from that, we set a bunch of goals. We wanted more contextual information rather than this kind of bank of text that you were supposed to just sort of read all up front. We wanted to try and teach without using rewards as much, so we wanted people to kind of have to be self-motivated more like they are in general in EVE. We wanted to meet expectations, both the external expectations, and set people up so that they know what to expect from the game once they get through the NPE, and we wanted to try and get them into these richer experiences as fast as possible. So from that, we kind of laid out some features. We started with the contextual information piece. Felt like that was something that provides a lot of benefit for all EVE players and would act as a foundation for the rest of the NPE. So that would come through tooltips and through notifications. And then after that, we would try to get to the rich experiences part and the kind of syncing up the NPE with how the rest of the game actually works through a system we call opportunities, for now at least. And then finally, we kind of have this last feature, the pod guide, as a potential thing. We aren't sure, but there may be a need for a large sort of reference in the game to quickly find concepts or features kind of explained in some place. And so we may have a need for that. We're not positive yet, but we kind of move that to the back until we figure out whether or not we need it. So this was the roadmap. And so now I can kind of talk about where we're actually at with that. Tooltips, of course, have been rolled out. And you guys are probably familiar with them by now for one reason or another. We have most of the big features covered. We have like the main screen covered. We have things like the market, the character sheet, industry window. So we've basically covered most of the game with tooltips, which is great. We have validated the impact this has on new players, which I'll talk about more in a little bit, but we've seen that this is really positive for people, that it's very natural for them to explore this way, and they can get a lot of information, so that's really good. One thing we definitely did do with tooltips is underestimated the impact on veteran players. We were very focused on improving the new player experience and didn't account as much as we should have for the veteran player experience when it came to tooltips. And so that's a good thing to learn. And that means that kind of what's next for us, other than adding more content, we do still have more places we can add information. And also the ability to add more advanced information. So putting deeper explanations in expanded tooltips or something like that is something we're still looking at. But we also we're still actively working on better customization and filtering based on player needs. So we still want to tackle this problem of making sure new players can get the information they need, but veteran players have a good way to make sure they're not getting that information if they don't need it. And so that hopefully will come soon. We've CCP Arrow and some of the guys on Game of Drones, along with my team, we're working on figuring out how that could work. And it hasn't hit the game yet, but it will before long, I'm sure. And then now we're rolling out a new notification system, which is very exciting because notifications are something the game needs. It's not like obviously the most flashy type of feature, but it's something that is really important. Feedback is something the game in general does in a lot of really random ways. There's feedback coming to you through pop-ups sometimes, through like Neocom things flashing sometimes, through messages popping up in the upper left near your character sheet. It's kind of just all over the place, and we really wanted to unify the feedback, make it a little more fun, and so it's really good that we're getting this in. Just threw some early mock-ups in here to see kind of where we've come. One thing that was really, really awesome about notifications that you guys, some of you are probably familiar with, is that we were able to release it as an opt-in beta feature, which is something we really haven't done at all in EVE, and it's really, really amazing what it kind of let us do. We were really surprised to find out how many people actually took advantage of this. We didn't necessarily know, but we had a dev blog and a video dev blog and forum posts, but this managed to hit 15,000 people actually enable it. It's not even just that those people heard about it, it's that they actually chose to participate, which is great. And then of the people who enabled it, not very many of them turned it back off, which hopefully means it doesn't suck, which is really good. And then while that let us release earlier than we wanted to and gather feedback on TQ, because one thing we've been noticing lately is that CC feedback is not adequate for this kind of feature, because people people don't run off to CC to test notifications, and they're also not testing them in a realistic environment because they're not getting the same kind of stuff happening to their characters. And so, like with tooltips, for instance, without being able to test it on TQ first, we missed a bunch of stuff that we found out only after actual users had it on TQ. So it was really nice with notifications to be able to use TQ to get that information fast before we ship it to everyone. So for notifications, we have a lot more content to add. One of the biggest things we've seen from the feedback so far is just a request for basically more stuff in the feature. which is great. That's something we want to be doing anyway. So we're going to try and add things like kill mails and industry job notifications and a whole list of other things to this as soon as we can. Right now it's getting polished up based on feedback, getting some more tweaks before it goes out in Phoebe. And then after that, we'll look at adding more stuff to it than it has now, which is good. And then continuing to improve usability, we gave a lot of customization to people with this feature, which has gone really well. But there's still more things that people have asked for. Clear history is one that's going in right away, but there'll be more, I'm sure, that we'll be adding. And one other element of this that we are still kind of exploring is notifications that have to do with things that are messaged to the player rather than to the characters. So this would be stuff like server messages and store messages and stuff like that. So we're still looking into that. And now the part that you guys haven't heard as much about is opportunities. This is the system that will hopefully just replace the tutorial. I don't know if I've said that yet in this presentation, but that is the goal. Is to actually just replace it, and this would be sort of the new way that we handle teaching new players. What I said at FanFest is that we wanted to draw inspiration from games like Minecraft or Don't Starve, look at kind of an achievement-y system, but keep it very minimal. Don't have it where people are running, feeling compelled to go check boxes, just that if they don't know what they should be doing, they have a good resource to point them in a good direction. But we didn't necessarily know exactly how this should look. And when we started trying to actually talk about a design for it, we realized that we don't even know exactly what we need to teach. The tutorial has been kind of in the game for so long, and it's so kind of relied upon that we could only think about teaching based on the tutorial. So we did things like map what the tutorial teaches throughout its steps and then try to draw that over into this system. But realize we don't even know if we need to be doing that. We don't know if those things are the right things to be teaching. We don't know what people can actually figure out on their own without having someone tell them. And so we decided to start with a lot of playtesting, which is really, really fantastic. We wanted to actually just see what people do, how they play the game without anything there helping them to find out where they're getting hung up, what sort of stuff would be really important for us to teach. So I want to talk a little about this because it's been pretty entertaining as well as very helpful. So we got some people, which surprisingly we were able to pretty easily find a bunch of people in Reykjavik who were gamers but hadn't ever tried EVE Online. And we didn't match them super aggressively to actual EVE demographics. Had a surprising number of females, even though that's not the majority in EVE. But that's fine. And a range of games. We had people who are MMO people, WoW people, or other MMOs, and also more kind of FPS or RTS type people. So people that were very tech and game literate, but just had never played EVE. And what we did for the first round of tests is we sat them, and we wanted to be able to do this rapidly and just not spend too much time developing before we had an idea of what we need to do. So this is actually a PDF that we put on a second monitor. It has some very simple tasks on it, just under these categories that are arranged kind of randomly. And we put people next to this monitor, and we put them in a ship in space. We skipped the entire character creation. We just started them in a ship, and we just said go, and waited to see what would happen. We also created this overlay. So this was just a one-button toggle that brought this up over top of the screen to explain some of the very basic interaction stuff, kind of what some of the windows are, how to use the camera, let people know that tooltips exist, and this could be just brought up anytime they wanted so that they could get some basic information. And that was it. And then we let them go and we filmed them and then did interviews afterwards. And some really interesting stuff came up. So I have a couple examples from the first round of tests. This is one of the new players, who had gone into a station, accepted a mission, but while he was looking at the mission text, he clicked to show info on the destination system for the mission. And you can see where the default location is for the default placement for the show info window is. And so he undocked, just ignored the window that he'd opened to show info, and then never had any idea where he was or where to go to complete the mission because it's covering everything in the system panel. So he just had no idea what to do. So he just was really frustrated, and his playtest ended with him never having any idea where his mission was. This is another tester who docked in a station, and then probably thinking that she needed to be walking around in the station to do anything, right-clicked her ship and hit leave ship, and then later wanted to get back in her ship to leave the station, so she right-clicked her pod, but that doesn't work. You can't get back in your ship that way, so she never found her ship again. And so that's how her playtest ended. Anyway, so we did, a few of these, and we found a whole bunch of stuff out. Number one, we found out that we really need tooltips and notifications. We got a lot of mileage out of tooltips. People use them intuitively. They immediately start exploring, using them, and they got the most information they got from the game in their first 10 minutes or so is from tooltips. We also super validated the need for notifications. People never got any feedback during these tests about whether or not they'd completed the tasks that they were trying to do. They never understood. We had a tester who was really frustrated because she couldn't travel to another system, even though she'd autopiloted 5 jumps along her route. She just didn't realize that she'd actually jumped into a new system. And so we can use notifications to give feedback about events like that to let people know that they're doing something right and that things are happening, even though sometimes it's not clear, because EVE is such an unintuitive game when you're used to, running around or just, shooting stuff or whatever. It takes, people a lot of work to understand how a lot of the really basic systems are laid out. We learned that this overlay we made was completely useless. And this is a really, really valuable kind of thing we can learn from playtesting that I think gets us in trouble a lot of time. We have a really smart idea. We think we know it's really good. We were so excited about this overlay. We were running around the office showing people that in a day we'd managed to make this thing that could just explain the whole UI. And we were pumped. And then people never used it. They never understood what it was for. They intuitively knew all the things that we tried to tell them. And so it was just useless. And so that's awesome. We were able to just immediately ditch that as a feature, which saves us tons of time and probably saves us putting something that's either bad or not helpful into the game. And one really cool thing we found out is that people figure out an enormous amount of stuff on their own. People are really smart. And even though EVE's really hard, there's a lot of stuff that people had no problem figuring out. It was amazing how fast people managed to, we had several testers who got into the game, warped to an asteroid belt, mined stuff, went to a station, refined it, and sold it on a market, and never got told anything about how any of that works other than our little PDF that said that there's an asteroid belt. So that was really encouraging and means that maybe we have way more content in the current tutorial than we even need. The big negative thing we discovered, which is probably obvious, is that there's a ton of these weird hang-ups that can really block people, like the show info location, like right-clicking to leave your ship and then never finding it again. We found a whole bunch of these, and from these, and yeah, some bigger things as well, but from the small things, we actually created kind of this side feature or project to just start tackling these, because this affects everyone regardless of whether it's the current tutorial or our new one. And so we've been knocking these out. There's things like the station lobby panel got changed. We put the inventory back into it by default. We put the agents tab. We made it bigger because nobody could find agents because it was like a chat tab before. We changed the show info location, a whole bunch of things. And there's a bunch of stuff in here that we haven't done yet. Some of it big, some of it small, but this stuff I think we're going to get a lot of mileage out of. So then we went on to round 2, made some adjustments. Big things we did were we actually used this overlay since we had it rather than using a normal window for some reason. But we basically moved the content from the PDF into the overlay, and then we hooked up notifications to that system. So we have the same short task lists with a little bit of extra hints in there that covered some of the things people were hanging up on, and then notifications to let people know when they'd actually completed the tasks, along with making them green like this. And we did some more testing. And this round of tests got us to more of the bigger stuff. people, it is a little scary. People ran into less hangups in this round, less of these weird, little oddities in the game, and instead we started to see some of the bigger problems with the new player experience. This is a shot of a person trying desperately to destroy this billboard. She spent at least 10 minutes trying to figure out why she couldn't kill this billboard, and she actually managed to not quite disable her safety, even though she has it hovered there. She didn't do it, but she said in the interview afterwards that if she would have disabled it, she definitely would have just shot the billboard and gotten concorded, and that would have been fine, because she just really wanted some action. And that's something that we saw as a common thread. The more tests we did, the more we saw that people really want to shoot stuff right away. And so one of the things we... yeah. So that was a big thing we encountered a lot. Another kind of stranger one, this is a person at a planet trying to interact with the customs office, trying to dock at it or shoot it or pretty much anything. And this is another person doing it, and this is another person doing it, and this is another person in PI. We found out people are really drawn to planets for some reason. It's like the most familiar thing, and so they just head there and try to do stuff. And then they get really frustrated. They don't know what this PI screen is or how to use it, and they don't know what the customs offices are for, and they get really mad. So there's a lot of this kind of thing. Another one that I don't have pictures here for is that people really want to use a map. We discovered that almost everyone, regardless of what they're trying to do, wanted to use a map to do it, and our map is insanely confusing. And so they would open the star map and just be overwhelmed and have no idea what to do. And so kind of we are looking at how to, rather now than actually focusing a ton on the opportunities themselves and the content there, we're actually looking at changes we can make to starter systems, to kind of the starting environment for new players that fulfill some of these things that they're running into. So, we're talking about doing something like scattering some kind of training bot NPCs, tons of them all over new space so that people have tons of stuff to shoot, and then drop a bunch of little blueprints and fitting mods and stuff so that they can quickly start playing around with their ship and shoot things easily. And maybe that's not the solution we'll go with, but we need to start tackling some of this stuff just to make kind of the early experience better for everyone. So from round 2 results, one of the other things that came from it is, again, we had some really good successes. We had several playtesters who just knocked this stuff out, no problem. I mean, they have no explanation here for any of these features, and they were able to do pretty much everything that we asked. They were able to dock and accept missions and complete them. They were able to mine, sell things on the market, travel. They could figure pretty much everything out in the first 30 minutes without us making them read anything. So again, that's really exciting. And again, we found some big problems. Oh yeah, the one I haven't mentioned, everyone uses WASD for quite a while. And then not only do they first try to use WASD and then realize it doesn't work, they then feel like they actually can only navigate their ship with right-click. Everyone uses right-click, and they want to, they really want to manually pilot. People, I think, really want to feel like they're, in control of the ship, and they don't. They feel like they're locked to this weird right-click navigation because they don't know they can double-click in space, and they know WASD doesn't work. So that's another big one we have to tackle. But yeah, we want to start hitting some of these as soon as we can. The other big thing from round 2 is we still kind of have some work to do figuring out the motivation and rewards thing. Obviously, people in these playtests aren't getting any loot. They're not getting any rewards for completing tutorial missions. So they have nothing, and people want stuff. So we need a way to give them stuff, but we need it to not be attached to the task completion. So we're still looking at how to handle that. Yeah. So hitting those. The other big thing we're looking at next is going to TQ as soon as we can. We're talking about possibly shipping some version of this to TQ in maybe an A/B test manner as early as December. Again, our kind of conversion off tutorial is so bad now that we're fine. We're just excited about this. We've seen enough success with it that we're happy to basically iterate live on TQ for some group of players at least, and just see how that goes. Because one of the big things we can't do internally is get people with the right motivation for playing. I mean, we're telling people to come in and play. We're kind of forcing them to fight through some of these hang-ups. So it's hard for us to tell when they would leave. And it's also hard to find people who would actually want to play. A lot of these people maybe don't like sci-fi or whatever. And so on TQ, we're going to get the best kind of data about this feature. So let's see if the crazy thing is next. Yes. I'm going to talk about this a little bit. So, yeah, so that's kind of the NPE where we're at. This is a topic that I'm very interested in, and I've been sort of, as kind of a side project, half trying to work on a feature plan that could introduce permanent death into EVE Online for about a year now, and it's gaining a little bit of momentum, and so decided I might as well talk to you guys about it, and then I can have conversations here about how crazy I am with all of you, and that'll give us a good indication of how this feature kind of might take shape. So, most of the time, the reaction to this initially is that it's a really terrible idea. And it was actually really fun a little while back. This got posted on Reddit again. It seems to pop up every once in a while, but this is Hilmar back in like 2003, posting a dev blog that just says, anyone interested in an option that allows you to train skills at double time, and the flip side is that you permadie. And this always just kind of gets laughed out of the room whenever it gets posted. But I think what's important kind of about this is just this has been an idea that's been around the game for a long time. In a game that is built around consequences and around loss, this is a very obvious place to end up, even though figuring out how to actually do it is not so obvious. But it's important, I think, to say that this is not necessarily new. So I'm going to go into just kind of a basic outline of how we're kind of imagining this could work. And again, keep in mind the whole time that it's not something we're actually building right now. It's not something that is coming to you anytime right away, but it's something that we're thinking about. So there's three big pillars to this. The first one is character stuff. Obviously, that the character dies, if it dies, is kind of the important base part. But there's other parts too. We would have to change pod mechanics so that you weren't just immune to dying when you were in high sec and low sec, but never go to 0-0. So we would probably fiddle around with that somehow, maybe add a line time to capsules on these characters and also interdiction nullify them so that they are exposed to risk no matter what security of space they're in. We would have to make them suspect all the time so that they could be attacked no matter where they were and not only die in high sec to suicide ganks. And of course, we'd have to change the character creation to allow you to actually make these and have them look different and feel different and all of that. Second big pillar is skills. And the way we're talking about this right now, even though this is the part that's changed the most, is that permadeath characters would not train at all. They would never gain skill points over time. But instead, they would have some kind of implant that allows you to inject a total of allocatable skill points that was set at certain levels. So say 5 million, 10 million, and 20 million skill points, or something like that you would just inject, allocate however you want, and then you would never train, so you'd be at that kind of level all the time. And there would, of course, have to be major limitations on which skills were available. Nothing that worked in a station, for instance. You couldn't be just an industry alt that just gets handed 10 million skill points, so there would be limitations on what skills were available. The third big pillar is we've talked about how it would be really fun to have tracking for the lives of these characters, and that would potentially apply to anything that they could do. Most of it would be PvP probably, but tracking mission completions or any number of other things would be on the table. And then what we would do is when you die, we would show you those stats. There would be ways to compare them to other people to in your alliance, in your corp, all over the game, whatever. So it would be kind of a competitive thing. And where that goes is kind of up for grabs, whether it turns into something that's very competitively focused or just something we expose and let people kind of work out however they want. Let's see what. Yeah. Okay, so in terms of kind of what's valuable about this, like I said, it matches up with Eve's sort of character really well as a game with consequences, and this is kind of the ultimate consequence, so it fits really well in that way. We also think there's a lot of potential here to drive engagement for old players. This is a new kind of content that, especially if it's sort of competitively focused, could bring back a lot of people to come and try and see how well they can do compared to their friends. And that would be really, really fun for a lot of people, I think. And the amazing thing about doing this in EVE compared to other games where you see hardcore modes or permadeath modes is that usually in those games, those characters are kind of cordoned off to their own servers. But in EVE, it works really well to mix them in with everyone else. So it provides content for anyone who's not using it. So say in Diablo, there's only 5% of people who play hardcore. They kind of have to be justified in their own little space because they're not affecting all the other players. But in EVE, if we had 4 or 5% of people playing these characters, the other 95% get to chase them around and try and kill them. And so we get really good content for everybody, which is cool. Oh, good, I had bullets here. And I even remember them. So then there's, of course, big risks. The things that come up most naturally for most people is that depending on how the skill point stuff is set up, it could be abusable. If we're handing skill points out in a different way and people are able to just go hide in a wormhole with a whole bunch of alts really easily and run sites, or they're able to suicide gank really easily and cheaply, or any number of other things, that could be bad. So we would have to be very careful that there wasn't abuse available through the system. And of course, that would be largely dependent on feedback, which we would go through an entire process of getting feedback from you guys. The other big thing that comes up a lot is lack of incentive. A lot of people feel like this is just dumb and that we would be kind of putting a bunch of time into something that not very many people would be interested in. It seems like, from my conversations, people tend to usually think that, and then after talking about it for a while, they get kind of excited. The reason we're looking at this kind of seriously again, actually, is that we had a team meeting where someone brought this up as a joke, and then we started talking about it, and then everyone got really excited and wanted to make it. And that kind of seems, that's what happened with the last 2 CSMs as well. We mentioned this to both this CSM and the last CSM. Both of them were kind of like, this is just weird, what are you doing? And then after a 30-minute meeting, they're kind of excited. So this is kind of debatable, I guess. Maybe it is true, but we would have to look into that more. And of course, the big thing is that skill points are very sensitive, and we can't screw up anything we do with skill points, and so we'd have to be very careful about how that would work. And that's been the thing that's, like I said, changed the most in the design because it's the most risky part, sort of. But despite all those things, there is a significant amount of excitement around this. Oh, cool slide. Did it work for you guys? So I guess, oh, here we go. So yeah, and just in terms of like when this could happen, or is it something we're seriously doing? We really don't know. It's just kind of a side project for me and a couple people on my team. We'll see how it goes. It's in kind of a very unstable state right now, and maybe we figure out a way that we're excited that we can make it work, and then we would go into a more serious feedback stage and look at implementing it, but we're not there yet. Anyway, so that's a whole bunch of NPE stuff and then something random. Thanks a lot for coming, and of course, everyone, keep bothering me when you see me everywhere around Vegas. Thanks, guys.